Well, hello, everybody. This is Reverend Mike Roque from Unity Spiritual Community in Grand Rapids. I want to welcome you to this course, which is going to be for those that are either looking to go even deeper into an understanding of what Unity is, as well as the possibility of becoming a member of Unity Spiritual Community. So over the course of the next three lessons, we're going to be covering all the information that I think is a wonderful foundation for people that are interested in taking their understanding of Unity even deeper, and we're going to talk about that shortly. Having said that, I wanted to start this off with a parable, a story, if you will. So I'm going to just read this to you. And it starts off, and the name of this is called A Cup of Tea. And the story goes, once, a long time ago, there was a wise Zen master. People from far and near would seek his counsel and ask for his wisdom. Many would come and ask him to teach them, enlighten them in the way of Zen. He seldom turned away anyone. One day, an important man, a man used to command and obedience, came to visit the master. And he said, I have come today to ask you to teach me about Zen. Open my mind to enlightenment. The tone of the important man's voice was one used to getting his own way. The Zen master smiled and said that they should discuss the matter over a cup of tea. When the tea was served, the master poured his visitor a cup, and while he poured, the men kept on talking. He poured, and the tea rose to the rim, and he began to spill over the table, and finally onto the robes of the wealthy man. Finally, the visitor shouted, Enough! You're spilling the tea all over. Can't you see the cup is full? And the master stopped pouring and smiled at his guest. You are like this teacup, so full that nothing more can be added. Come back to me when your cup is empty. Come back to me with an empty mind. I love that story. And my invitation to you as we go through this course is simple. During our time together, I simply ask you and invite you to empty your cup. Awesome. Okay, so I am going to start off with actually my own story. How did this thing happen to me, my 45 plus years of being in Unity? And I thought it would be a good way to begin to help you understand a little bit about where I'm coming from and why I'm so passionate and still am about Unity, and why so many other people are as well. So my story is fairly simple in some ways, complex in others, if you will. When I was younger, my parents were agnostic. In other words, they didn't really go to church. We didn't really talk about God. They actually my dad had a Bible on his nightstand. And, I probably saw him read it a total of 5 times in the entire time that we were growing up as kids. So we didn't really talk about God. It wasn't good. It wasn't bad. It wasn't anything. It just wasn't really talked about. So as a result, what happened was my best friend lived across the street, and his parents and his family were super fun, lots of fun. And so they had a big family. They did a bunch of stuff together. And one of the things they did together was they went to church together. And that to me looked like a lot of fun, but what looked even funner was actually they would go out and have breakfast afterwards. They'd go to Big Boys. And that to me was like the most amazing thing ever, because we never went out and did stuff like that. So at one point I said, hey, could I go to church with you? And of course the answer was yes. And so I started going to a Methodist church. And the one that I was going to actually at the time was extremely fundamental. So I became at an early age a fundamental Christian. I could quote Bible scriptures. I could do all kinds of stuff, because underlying my wanting to go to church and do all that stuff is that I had a deep connection to God that I had developed prior to me even going to church. I loved God, just loved God. And so I started going to church, and I started learning all of the traditional Christian values, learned about Jesus, learned about the disciples, learned about some other things too. That I was I was born in original sin, and that, there was these things called the 10 Commandments. And if I broke any of the 10 Commandments, there was this place called hell that I had the possibility of spending the rest of eternity in. And ultimately that, except for this one Son of God called Jesus, that, all I could do was try to do better. And that was it. So it was attempt, try to do better, or else you're going to spend the rest of eternity in this place called hell. And that's what I learned. And as I kept studying and studying, what happened is by the time I started getting into my teen years, so I had read the entire Bible from the time I was about 7 or 8. I read it. It took me about 4 years to read it, but I did. And then what happened is, as I hit my teen years, I started really struggling with it. And this whole idea, I kept going, well, if it says this here and it says this over here, like it's not making sense to me. And so I started to question a lot. In fact, when I was in high school, I actually was going to a Catholic church and had this beautiful priest who I had for chemistry. And after chemistry, he had a study hall. And what would happen is after his class, we would sit there and I would debate him. And if you can believe this, I would actually tell him things like, all the Catholics are going to hell who are praying to these saints, right? Because in my mind, that's what was going to happen. And he would just look at me and he would go, oh, Michael, oh, Michael, Michael, Michael. And so what happened, and as the story goes, is this was when I was about 16 years old. My mother came home one night and I asked her where she had been. And she told me, hey, I went to this place called Unity. I think you might like it. You should come check it out. And so I did. And to make a long story short, 5 plus years later, I'm still here and I haven't left. I remember going in and watching Reverend Gene Sorensen at Unity of Livonia. And I just remember him talking about this idea of there is no sin, there is no hell, there is no devil. You're not born in original sin. You're actually an original blessing. And all these things that I just was struggling with all of a sudden became crystal clear to me. And Unity allowed me the freedom to go explore my own spirituality and not be threatened by it. So people in Unity really allow you the freedom to go play. And so if you want to go study things and dive into things, for the most part, that's okay. Because what I've learned over 40 plus years, 45 plus years at Unity is that Unity really is about spiritual practices and tools. To me, the most common thing that I think about when I think about Unity is like it's Buddhism. In other words, it is a practice of spiritual tools that can make a huge difference in your life. And that's what Unity is to me. So that's what happened. So I started engaging at Unity of Livonia quite heavily, was very, very involved with a youth group called YAU at the time. And so for 4 or 5 years, we put together a group of people. We had as many as 25 to 30 that were anywhere from late teens into our early 20s in college. We had a fantastic group there. Did that for 4 or 5 years. And then what happened is after that, I decided to get on the board of directors at Unity of Livonia and did that for a couple of years. And then what happened was I actually wound up moving to Grand Rapids. And once I got to Grand Rapids, we wound up going to, actually there was 2 Unity churches here at the time. And I wound up going to the Unity Church of Peace out in Ada. Got very, very involved at the time. Actually, I was the youth director for the high school kids for 9 years, is what I did. And that was just the joy of my life. My kids were going through school at the time, so it was a lot of fun to do that. And then after I got done with doing that, then all of a sudden I started to get involved with the board of directors there and sat on the board for 6 years, president for 3 of those years. And then what I started doing was somewhere around 2015, I started doing guest speaking. Excuse me. I taught classes and workshops. I got really involved with all that kind of stuff because I loved it. I loved it. And then in 2018, somebody came up to me and asked me if I would consider being a spiritual leader out in Ada at the time. They were struggling and they said, hey, we just would love somebody to come in and kind of calm everything down. And so I agreed to do it. And so in 2018, I started part-time being the spiritual leader there. And then about a year later, I started enrolling in some ministerial classes because one of the commitments I had to make was, one of these days I'll do that. Even though I figured, I'll get to it one of these days. And once I dove in and I just really went after all the classes and got all that done in order for me to basically enroll in the ministerial program. And so in 2020, I enrolled in the ministerial program. And then in 2022, June, I actually got ordained. So, and at that point as well, we had the two churches in Grand Rapids were coming together. So there was a church in Ada, there was one in Walker, and those two churches were merging. And we're going to talk more about that in one of the other lessons as well. So as I talk about that, I've got a long history of unity, and it's something that it's been inside of me. It still is. The freedom and the flexibility to go play, the spiritual tools that they have, I think are essential for somebody looking to go through their own understanding and awakening about themselves, about God, about everything else like that. And I just love it. And I have for a long, long time. So having said that, what I want to do is now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start, if you will. I've got a little bit of a slideshow to share with you. And so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start the slideshow. And we're going to go slideshow, and there we go. Great. So this is again called the Unity Basics, and I just want to welcome you and start going over a couple things. So these there's going to be three classes. The first class is going to be more about the history of the Unity movement. The second class is going to be about Unity principles and beliefs. And then our third class is going to be about membership. So our class for today, I've already done this, is going to be the Unity story, but then we're going to talk about, we're going to go way back, before Unity actually, and we're going to talk about the history of New Thought, which is what Unity is a part of. We're going to talk about the origins of Unity, and then we're going to talk about Unity World Headquarters, as well as Unity Worldwide Ministries. So that's what's on the docket for the class this evening. I want to go back in on this chart and show here that Unity is part of something. But if you look at this development of New Thought in North America, go way down to the bottom, and I'm going to try and use my arrow to point you to this. Here's Unity School of Christianity. So if you notice one thing, it's not alone. There's a lot of other things around it. There's Christian Science. There's, well, the Association of Unity Churches. Those are combined. But you've got Divine Science. You got United Church of Religious Studies, Religious Science. You've got the Unitarian Church that's merged with the Universalist Church. So you've got all these different organizations that really come from a very similar background in some cases. In fact, if you study some of those, you'll see where they cross over. So we really, in some ways, think that these are kind of sister churches in some ways absolutely not. For example, I'll give you a really obvious one. In Christian Science, what they believe is that you should never have to take any, you should never have to go to a doctor. And Unity does not in any way, shape, or form believe that whatsoever. So that would be where there would be a significant difference in the teachings, but there are some things that kind of overlap each other. And if you study Unity for a long time and start looking at some of these other New Thought religions, you'll find that there's some crossover. What I wanted to bring to your attention, though, with this graph, as you go up here and you start going up, you've got Emily Cady. We'll talk about her. We'll talk about Charles Immortal Fillmore. And you've got these other people, Ernest Holmes, you may have heard of, Emmett Fox, some people have heard of. But do you notice where all of them, or I should more importantly say who all of them studied underneath? And that's Emma Curtis Hopkins. And I really want to bring her to your attention because she was a powerhouse of a woman back in the 1800s and the early 1900s. And she was the one that taught hundreds, if not thousands, of people and ordained them. She was an amazing woman. If I had a chance to go back in history, I'd love to be able to talk to her about her teachings and stuff because she was such an amazing woman. As you start to go up higher, there's Mary Baker Eddy. Some people may have heard about her, but then you've got other people as well, like Ralph Waldo Emerson, and then they start tying in things that go back thousands and thousands of years, all the way to Plato and Hinduism and Buddhism. I'm just going to let you know that for me personally, of course, I understand the teachings of Jesus, but in terms of modern day, I was a little bit familiar with Phineas Quimby. That one I was familiar with, and I was also familiar with Ralph Waldo Emerson. before I began my own studies. So those ones weren't a complete new one to me, but I really, really love this entire graph. It gives you a good feel like, hey, where do we fit in? This is a great graphic to look at. The next slide is just going to be one I got out of Wikipedia. You know how that goes. But anyways, it gives you a pretty good idea of who Emma Curtis Hopkins was: a spiritual leader, New Thought movement, a teacher, a writer, a feminist, a mystic, a healer who taught and ordained hundreds of people, including many women. She was called the Teachers of Teachers, a mother of New Thought, because a number of her students went on to own and start their own organizations, like Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, founders of Unity, Ernest Holmes, Emily Cady, author of Unity's cornerstone text, Lessons in Truth. And then there's a quote about her influencing New Thought more than any other single teacher. So I just think she's really, really important to acknowledge in terms of the New Thought movement. Now we're going to actually spend a little bit of time talking specifically about Unity. For those who don't know, the Unity movement was based off of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And there's their picture in their old age and their young age, because they started this in their mid-40s. We'll talk about that in a minute. And it went on to become, from basically nothing in the late 1800s, to become a large international movement within a very short amount of time. And so when you look at these pictures, just know that that's why we've got the young Charles and Myrtle, or Myrtle and Charles, and then we've got the old as well. So that's where those pictures come in. And of course, that's a picture of Unity Village, which is in Lee Summit, Missouri, which is about a half-hour drive outside of Kansas City. It's a really, really beautiful place. What I'd like to do is, there's a really cool video that I want you to be able to watch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop share. And now you're going to be able to just see me, but I'm going to share again into here. And hang in there with me for just a minute, because I want you to see this video. It's pretty cool. So we're going to go here so you can see it. And then I'm going to let you enjoy this for now. Here you go.
Her husband, Charles Fillmore. But she was born Mary Carolyn Page on August 6, 1845, the seventh of 9 children. As a child, she adopted the name Myrtle and would later reject the teachings of her strict religious parents. Ever since she was a little girl, Myrtle had been sick. At a young age, she contracted tuberculosis. For many years, she believed she was incurably weak and sickly.
I had all the ills of mind and body that I could bear. Medicine and doctors ceased to give me relief, and I was in despair.
That was until Myrtle discovered new spiritual ideas and principles we now call Unity. The year was 1886, and Myrtle was in her early 40s. She and her husband Charles attended a lecture by metaphysician Dr. E.B. Weeks of Chicago. Myrtle left the talk with a stronger faith and an understanding of her innate divine potential for healing through affirmative prayer.
It flashed upon me that I might talk to the life in every part of my body and have it do just what I wanted. I began to teach my body and got marvelous results.
Instead of seeing her body as weak, inefficient, and diseased, she began speaking words of strength and power to every part of her body: her liver, stomach, abdomen, limbs, eyes, and heart.
I didn't get discouraged at their being slow to wake up, but kept right on, both silently and aloud, declaring words of truth until they did respond. And neither did I forget to tell them that they were free, unlimited spirit. I told them they were the centers of life and energy, omnipresent.
Myrtle began regularly affirming,
I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness.
By repeating this affirmation, Myrtle believed she was going to get better. And 2 years later, she did. In 1888, she was healed of the tuberculosis condition that had threatened her life. Myrtle remained committed to blessing and encouraging her body with true thoughts and words.
I became very watchful as to what I thought and said. I didn't let any worried or anxious thoughts into my mind. and I stopped speaking gossipy, frivolous, petulant, angry words.
Myrtle was excited by her healing discovery, and so were her family and friends. She began working with others in need of healing. In time, her husband Charles Fillmore began his own practice of prayer and meditation. He began to heal from an ice skating accident he had at age 10. In 1889, inspired by Myrtle's transformation, the Fillmores founded the Unity Movement in Kansas City, Missouri, as a healing ministry based on the power of prayer and the power of thoughts to create reality. In 1890, the couple pioneered a prayer outreach that grew into Silent Unity, the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week prayer ministry that still serves the world today.
I want everybody to know about this beautiful, true law and to use it. It is not a new discovery, but when you use it and get the fruits of health and harmony, it will seem new to you, and you will feel that it is your own discovery.
Her work lives on through Silent Unity and the inspiring manuscripts and personal papers in the Myrtle Fillmore collection at the Unity Library and Archives. The collection is being digitized for online access. To learn more or help support this effort, visit unity.org.
So as you can see, Unity actually was started by Myrtle. Myrtle's the one that started it. She was the one that had been suffering. She was the one that was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Charles was a businessman. He was into real estate. And so he was busy in his real estate business doing what he was doing. Myrtle obviously got tuberculosis, and at the time that was a death sentence, and they were trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to do? So they started looking at alternative methods. And then all of a sudden they traveled to Chicago, where they went to see E.B. Weeks, who gave the talk, the famous talk. And then they also spent time at that time with who other than Emma Hopkins. And so the kind of combination at that time, and Myrtle started practicing and applying these principles. And as a result, she wound up healing herself. Now, it didn't happen overnight. It actually took a couple of years for her to do that. But eventually she did. And as she was healing, Charles started going like, hey, like, wait a minute, like, what's going on, right? And so Charles started paying attention and then said, oh my God, like, I got to start applying these principles. And then Charles went through his own healing process. And as he started going through his own healing process, Myrtle was already healed. They realized that this was something that they could not keep quiet. And that was really the beginning of the Unity movement. And then it just started to go. And when I say go, it went fairly quick. Let me get back into the slides here for a moment. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of a historical timeline here, just so you can see exactly what happened. So, well, this is going back prior to them, and this is all fun. So Myrtle was born in 1845. Charles was born in 1854, a little bit of an age difference there. But in 1874, Myrtle goes to Oberlin College in Ohio, graduates and goes to Texas to become a school teacher. And Charles moves to Texas as a young man to work on the railroads. In 1876, they met, and then they finally get married in 1881, and they move to Kansas City, and Charles sells real estate, okay? So then what happens is in 1866 to 88, this is when Myrtle becomes very sick. It was believed to be tuberculosis, which again was a death sentence back then. In 1886 is when they also go and they go see E.B. Weeks. And that's when she came up with the famous affirmation, I'm a child of God and therefore I don't inherit sickness. And again, she caught fire with that and she kept using it and talking to her body and affirming health and affirming strength and affirming that she was in perfect health, body, mind, and spirit. And it took 2 years, but eventually she heals herself. So in 1886, like I already mentioned, she also meets Emma Hopkins. All right. So then some other significant dates that start to happen, because again, once Myrtle heals herself and then Charles goes through his healing, things really start to move. And by the way, just so you know, Charles, out of the two of them, Charles was the prolific writer, and he loved to speak. And so Charles is often, when we look at unity in history, we often see a lot of books that Charles wrote. And some people mistakenly make the assumption that Charles was the primary one driving unity, and that is completely not the case. Because what happened was, and I'll show you this in a minute, but Myrtle was gravitated more towards the children. So Myrtle loved children, and so she gravitated more towards the children. Charles was more involved with the adults. Anyways, in 1889, the first issue of Modern Thought magazine comes out. In 1890, Silent Unity. For those of you that don't know, Unity has a 24/7 prayer ministry that you can call. In fact, it's one of the things that I'm going to have those people that are interested in becoming members, you're going to call Silent Unity, and you're going to either you're going to have them pray for you, or you're going to have them pray for somebody else that you know or a situation. And it's something that I quite frankly think everybody should have on speed dial. So Silent Unity is started in 1890. In 1891, Charles chose Unity as the name. What a great name. What a great name. We're going to talk about this in a minute. They signed something called the Founding Covenant. We're going to talk about that. And well, it's right there, actually. So there's the covenant. You can't read that, but I'm going to show this to you. And the thing that's fascinating about the covenant is that nobody was aware of this until long after 1892. I think they discovered it just after they died. They found it my understanding is they found it after they died. Where they found it, I don't know. But if you want to know what it says the following. We, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, husband and wife, hereby dedicate ourselves, our time, and our money, all we have and all we expect to have, to the Spirit of truth, and through it, the Society of Silent Unity. It being understood and agreed that the said Spirit of truth shall render unto us an equivalent for this dedication and peace of mind, health of body, wisdom, understanding, love, life, and abundant supply of all things necessary to meet every want without our making any of these things the object of our existence, in the presence of the conscious mind of Christ Jesus, the 7th day of December, 1892. So that's where this all started. They made a covenant to God and to each other and said, this is what we are doing. And boy, did they do it. And boy, did it start to take off. So other significant dates. In 1893, Myrtle starts Wisdom. In 1894, so this is really cool. We'll talk about Lessons in Truth in a minute, but for new people coming in, it used to be, and I think it's a little bit different now, but it still makes a lot of sense. If somebody really wants to get into the nitty-gritty on how did they actually do this, how did they heal themselves, there was a person that lived in New York called Emily Cady. And Emily Cady and Charles Fillmore were going back and forth with each other. Remember, Emily Cady also studied underneath Emma Hopkins as well, and they began corresponding back and forth, and she was sending some stuff to Charles, and Charles finally said, oh my God, this is exactly what we need to teach people that are coming into study this new thought stuff. Would you mind putting together the lessons the way that you're writing? Because I love the way that you write. And so over the course of about a year, she started sending these individual lessons to Charles. And as the story goes, eventually, those lessons became Lessons in Truth. And that was the original book that you still have and that you'll still see all the time were the original teachings of Emily Cady. In 1906, then I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute, but remember, they're doing everything out of their house. So for roughly 10, 11 years, they're doing everything out of their house. And then finally, they got so many people showing up at their house, they're like, what are we going to do? And so what they do is they go find some commercial space on Tracy Street in downtown Kansas City. And that's when they finally get out of their house, and now it's becoming something. In 1924, basically Daily Word, which still exists today. In fact, it's one of the things I'm going to suggest that you consider signing up for. You can get a digital copy on your phone, or you can have them send it that. But this is a publication that's been going on for over 100 years. And it's daily lessons that have a beautiful verse, a beautiful scripture, and how often people pick up the daily word and said, you know what, I feel like that was written exactly for me. So the daily word is a huge part of Unity history and still going on to this day. In 1929, Unity Village is built in Lee Summit, Missouri, which again is just outside of Kansas City. In 1929, there's the Great Depression. Don't forget about that. So what happens is they start building this huge village called Unity Village. But because of the Depression, they need to move back to Tracy Street for a while. So they move back to Tracy Street in 1930. And then about 10 years later, they move back to Unity Village and they start building that and building it and building it. And boy, did they build it. Just to show you some pictures, this is Tracy Street, again in downtown. It's in an industrial area. Unfortunately, the building is older at this point in time. They moved in 1906 till 1929. And at the time, by the time they moved out of it, they had added so much to the original building that it was massive. Just to show you a couple of pictures, there's the picture of myself and my sister and my brother and sister-in-law. When I got ordained in 22, they were actually still doing services there. And unfortunately, the building is in need of desperate repair. If it was up to me, I would have bought this if I was at Unity, and we would have considered it a historical landmark and redone it. There is a full chapel in there, and there's a ton of old material and old books and old daily words and everything. But this was absolutely a highlight to me going out to Kansas City, Missouri, and unfortunately, I don't think it's open anymore, which is just, it breaks my heart to think that it's not open at this time. This is actually the second floor. This is where it all started. So that's my wife, and we are on the second floor, and this is the actual place where they started doing lectures. And so you can see the walls, it's not in great shape. It's really just vacant, and they'll take you on tours. If, again, when they were open, we just had the minister give us a tour afterwards, and he took us upstairs, and it's dirty and it's nasty and everything else like that. But I'm telling you, when I stood up here, I just started to vibrate. I just could not believe this is where it really began. This is actually the chapel that's in the that was added on. So this building didn't originally have a chapel, but this was the first chapel after they moved out of the second floor. They built onto the back of the building and had a great big thing. And this is where they had many, many services over the course of years on Tracy Street. Here is some of the books and the stuff. This is actually a daily word from my birthday. So September 3rd, 1963. That is the daily word. I bless and praise the Lord who strengthens me. So how fun is that? And you can go in and get the daily word and see what's on your birthday. I just had such a kick. But they had books and stuff laying all over the place, and it's not organized, unfortunately. But it was still, I just absolutely loved it. Here's some more things. You can see like there's a weekly Unity from 1954 and 1942. There's something, Unity, the Beatitudes, and anyways, just a ton of stuff. I was just taking pictures because I was just having so much fun here because I'm a historical nerd. I'm loving this stuff. And then finally what happens is they buy property in 1920 and they start building on this property, and this is Unity Village. So now we're going to go is take a look at some Unity Village stuff. This is a picture of it currently with the great big, labyrinth. Thank you. Beautiful labyrinth. There's the big famous bell tower that you can see. There's in the middle where the blue is, you can kind of see where the pond is going there. This is where the administration building is. There's several other buildings on the property, and it's huge. I forget, it's like, I don't know how many acres. I think it's like 60 or 70 acres. I just know that there's a golf course on it, a 9-hole golf course. There's a 3-mile trail you can go on it, beautiful woods. They used to have one of the largest printing presses west of the Mississippi on it. They used to have oil and gas drilling on it. They used to have farms on it. It used to be huge. Now it's used, obviously, world headquarters, but they also do weddings and all kinds of other stuff there. So it's super cool. That's a picture again of just another, you can see the ponds and the fountains, which are really just beautiful and gorgeous. Obviously, they're set up for something that's happening here. This is called the Bridge of Faith, very famous in Unity tradition and lore. And that's just one of the buildings in Unity. There's me when I got ordained, and behind me is the Rose Garden, the famous Rose Garden at Unity, which many people have their ashes buried at Unity Village. That's where it's going to go, which is where the Rose Garden is. This is my wife and I hanging out at the fountains at night. I wish the picture was a little bit more clear, but it gives you a pretty good flavor of how beautiful it truly is on the grounds at Unity Village. This is, again, one of the outside little places where they do services and people use it for outdoor weddings and stuff like that. This is really cool because this is called Myrtle's Grove. So Myrtle used to go out and hang out beneath these trees, and it's a really powerful place. We went out there and spent, it was my wife's favorite place in the entire village, and she would go out there and sit underneath the trees and sit on those benches and just rest and just really get a feel for Myrtle. It's quite a beautiful place. Very beautiful on the grounds as well. Here's just a miscellaneous picture. There's a direct shot of the fountains. Again, this is one of the buildings that I showed you earlier. And again, this is the Rose Garden where all the people put their ashes. But you can see right there, that's basically a copy of, or that's what where the fountains are. Same thing right there. Beautiful row. Pretty cool. Okay. This is one of the pictures I took. The good news is, while at Tracy Street, it's kind of a mess and there's stuff laying all over the place. At Unity Village, actually, they have a ton of historical stuff, and that was one of my favorite places to go because, again, I'm a history nut. But I just took this picture because I thought it was super cool. There's the officials and the employees in 1926. So that's a picture of all of them, and I'm sure, and I've never been able to find or locate them, but I'm sure if we were to sit here and stare at this picture a little bit closer, I'm sure we could probably find Myrtle and Charles in this picture somewhere. Where, I don't know. Anyways, super cool picture. This is actually Charles's office, so you can see the head of Charles, that's his desk, and this is his real desk and where he sat and did a lot of his work from. And then they also have the one for Myrtle and her desk and the writings and stuff like that. Again, from a historical standpoint, I geek out on this stuff. So that's Unity Village, and now we're just going to spend a few moments talking about Silent Unity. Again, this is a 24/7. So for those people that are going to be wanting to become members, call it. And even if you aren't going to become a member, but you just want to get the information, I'm still suggesting to give it a call because I think it's super powerful and amazing. Unity is broken into two parts. One of them is called the Worldwide Headquarters. And by the way, both of these have their own websites. I'm going to go look at those in just a minute. But the Worldwide Headquarters is in charge of prayer, education, publishing, retreats, and other classes that are available. And then you've got Worldwide Ministry. And that's more, the way that I understand it, honestly, and sometimes these are confusing. And also, by the way, this is being recorded in 2025, and they are considering merging the two of these because they've been separate and together and separate and together. Well, I think they're finally going to merge them so that if you're watching this after 2025, you might know that they're no longer split. But I'm going to stop right now for just a minute because I want to see something. I'm going to stop share, and I'm actually going to show you, no, I want to go here, yes, because I just wanted to show you the different websites. Hold on just a second. Okay, there we go. So so this is the website unity.org, and this is more for the public. So if you come here, they got all kinds of stuff where you can go in and look at. Unity offers a tremendous amount of stuff. Like they've got different events that they host so you can get information. Here's an article that you can go look at and get. They're obviously very proud to be involved with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And here's some of the different ways that they can do that. Here's about love and relationships and gratitude. Just a tremendous amount of information depending on what you're wanting to dig into. Grow is going to be, if you want to subscribe to the Daily Word, you can do that. This is a great magazine called Spirituality and Health that Unity Now is in charge of. Obviously, Marianne Williamson. Books and gifts, all kinds of stuff. And then obviously the different things that you can do at Unity Village. So again, this is basically unity.org if you were to go there. Now this one is Unity UWM, and this is Worldwide Ministries. Again, this is more for the people on the inside, the ministers, the people that work there. This is where if you wanted to become a licensed teacher, or you wanted to become a spiritual director, or you wanted to become a minister, this is where you go find out how to do all the stuff. So I'm not going to go into it, but like for example, on this site, you can see where there's the map of the different ministries. There's the regional information, business meetings. It's all the business stuff. Here's the education if you want to go through the different programs that they offer. And then ultimately there's the member resources and support, from finances to employment support and evolving ministries, marketing tools, ministry service support. So you can see there's a lot of stuff, but I wanted to give you a feel of the two different websites. So if you ever decide to go out there and start looking and playing, this is where you would go look and play. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop share again, and then I'm going to go back to our presentation. There we go. Perfect. All right, cool. All right, so that's the difference between, again, World Headquarters and Worldwide Ministries. That's what we just went over. And then I'm just going to show you a few pictures from when I went and got ordained. Here's my card saying that I have basically been ordained. So that's a pretty cool thing. This was in June of 2022. This is me and my friend Greg Coles. Greg is a reverend. He was the minister of Bay City for 8 years and then became a regional a support person. And that's how I got to know Greg. And he was a tremendous support for me going through the program, and just a lovely human being. This is us. We're getting ready to go into, that was the practice, but that was the hall where we were ordained. And this is where we're practicing. So I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a flavor. This is one of the halls on the grounds of Unity Village. So that leads us to our homework. So for those of you who are going to be taking this as you want to become a member of Unity Spiritual Community of Grand Rapids, you've got homework. Oh no, not homework. Yeah, homework. First of all, I want you to go to the website, unity.org. And then I want you to go to the other website, unityuwm.org. And the third thing I want you to do is I want you to call Silent Unity. Oh, there's a typo in there. Sorry about that. And have somebody pray for you. And whether it's for you, it's for somebody in your family, it's for a friend, it's for a situation going on earth right now, it's for the government, whatever you want. Whatever you want to be prayed for, call them just to have the experience of doing it. And for me, I've got Unity Village, I've got Silent Unity on my speed dial. Okay, so that's your homework assignment. I also wanted to mention, for those of you that really want to do a deep dive and really start exploring and playing with it, there's a couple books that I found to be extremely helpful. The first one is not a Unity book, but it does a wonderful job of going over the New Thought era. And it's by April Moncrief. I found this book to be outstanding and would highly recommend it to anybody. Eric Butterworth, who's one of the most prolific writers in the Unity movement, especially more modern, wrote a book that explains Unity really, really well called A Quest for Truth. Of course, we can go back to the classics, Lessons in Truth by H. Emily Cady. And then if you wanted to, there's a beautiful book down in our library called 100 Years of Unity, and it kind of goes into some of those details, okay? So those are some good books you could consider getting. And lastly, what I would say is, well, not lastly, next week, now we've talked about the people and we've talked about the locations and we've talked about all that kind of stuff. Next week, we're going to be talking about what is it that Unity really believes? What are the principles and beliefs that we have? So that's what we're going to be covering next time. So having said that, I'm going to stop share and just say, I hope this has been helpful. I just love it. I love teaching this stuff. I love talking about it. For those of you that are in class, we get to go a little bit deeper into some of these concepts. But nonetheless, if you're watching this after the fact, and you've got questions, don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. Other than that, I hope this has been fun and been helpful and informative. And we'll plan on seeing you next time where we'll talk about the philosophies and beliefs, okay? All right, take care, have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you soon. All right, bye-bye.